So when I was around 8 years old, my best friend and next door neighbor, Rosie, and we decided we had the best idea. We were going to dig a swimming pool, and we were going to do it in my backyard. Today's sermon is called Digging Down, and that is exactly what we did that day. It was summer in Los Angeles, that's where I'm from, and we were hot, and we were bored, and we were determined to have a pool. But listen, we didn't just grab some shovels and mindlessly start digging. I mean, we spent hours laying out schematics for this thing. I even convinced my dad to drive us to the hardware store to buy a tarp to line the bottom. We meant business. And then we did the next obvious thing. We put on our swimsuits. I mean, what else do you wear when you're digging a swimming pool? And we got to work. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the landscape of Southern California, LA dirt is hard. It's dry. It's desert dirt. And it's tightly packed and parched. And I lived in the San Fernando Valley. Your minister is, yes, officially a Valley girl. I am. I've ditched the accent, but maybe one day I'll pull it out for you if you're lucky. And that is a particularly savanna-like place. It's just a sprawling desert land, 250 square miles of it, and it's encircled by these massive mountain ranges, 4 of them. To give you a visual, every old Hollywood Western movie was filmed in the San Fernando Valley. Okay, so it's a dusty place with wind systems blowing dirt and sand down from that circular range of mountains all year round and just kind of settles and sits there. To live in the valley was to have a very close and personal relationship with your duster because there was dust everywhere. And so there Rosie and I were on that desert landscape, digging down, beating the ground with our shovels, trying to break up that hard sedimentary ground, adding water to soften it. And you will be surprised that we actually made a really, really big hole. We were doing quite well. I told you, we were determined. But after several hours, my shovel hit something really hard. And thinking it was a rock, I reached down to pick it up, and it turned out to be what seemed like a piece of bone. And it scared me. And Rosie was really scared too. And so wide-eyed, we just threw it back in the hole and decided, I don't even remember if words were spoken, to quickly just fill it back in. And we packed the earth down with our shovels and then just sat there silently. And I remember my dad coming out smiling, saying, "What happened? No pool?" And we both, without any rehearsing, just said, we changed our minds. And I never told my parents about what we found, and Rosie and I never talked about it. It was like something about finding that piece of bone, we thought, it almost made it unspeakable, if that makes any sense. And maybe it was a strangely shaped piece of rock or the bones of a previous owner's pet. But I have never forgotten what it felt like in that moment as a small child, an 8-year-old, to consider the unseen, unknown worlds that exist deep within the earth, the dirt and soil just below our feet. It wasn't the thought of the bone that scared me or made it feel unspeakable, but rather the feeling, and remember, I was only 8, I couldn't possibly articulate it this way, but the feeling that the land didn't belong to just me. It really didn't belong to me at all. It had stories to tell that weren't mine. This could have been my first spiritual awakening, for after all, spiritual awakenings are simply encounters with something bigger than ourselves. So big that all you can do is just sit there quietly and say, what was that thing that just happened? What is that? And we know, of course, that incredible discoveries have been made by simply digging down beneath the Earth's surface. Whole civilizations discovered beneath the many places we call home and know by heart. Not long ago, the city of Aztecs, Templo Mayor, which consists of seven layers of pyramids, was discovered in Mexico City underneath its main cathedral, at the center of that big old city. On the Laetoli Plain of Tanzania, paleontologist Mary Leakey found a trail of hominid, our human ancestors, hominid footprints buried deep in the earth, preserved underneath hardened ash. Footprints that date back 3.75 million years. I mean, just take that in for a moment. Wild, right? 2 sets of footprints. Barefoot peoples, get this, walking closely together in the rain. How do we know this? Because the ash also preserved the pockmarks of the raindrops that fell around them. And I admit that I am the type of person, maybe this comes with a job, that finds symbolism in everything, that sees it most everywhere. It's how I make meaning in this world, and I sense that most of us are this way, whether we think it of ourselves or not. I do think it's how we're wired. And those footprints and pyramids and the symbolism of digging down into the stories of those who came before us, all those who once belonged to this place, as we do now, well, all of this just makes me feel like surely, the thread, the symbolic thread, has not been cut. Surely we are a part of something old and long and wondrous. And also, it brings up in me a longing to stop building over and start building with. I am a child of the 70s and 80s, and I am only now really waking up to this stuff. I wasn't taught this when I was young, about the people who lived on the lands I belong to and know them by name. Were any of you really? When I covered up that hole on that summer day, I had no idea that I stood on land stewarded and loved by the Tongva people who lived in the area for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and that their name Tongva literally translates to people of the earth. and that when the Spanish arrived in California in the 1700s, life as they knew it was over. Hence, a valley, my home, my most loved place of belonging, now called the San Fernando Valley. And it's a horrifying story. It's awful, not unlike the stories of the Massachusetts tribe who once belonged to this area. And we means us and our larger faith and many more in our wider communities. We're all waking up to this now because a lot of us weren't taught about this stuff. And more churches and institutions are adopting land acknowledgments, putting a lot of time into making sure they're accurate. And they keep changing because we keep learning more. And not unlike the reckoning work that's being done around racism and white supremacy culture, we're also coming to know and tend to the truth, the painful truths of colonialism. That's what we're doing. And it's wonderful. I'm thinking of that hymn that we often sing to call us into church, and it goes, ours is no caravan of despair, worshiper, wanderer. Ours is no caravan of despair in this. It's wonderful. Just yesterday, we made a circle here in this sanctuary, and we talked about all of this. We asked ourselves what this building has to say about welcome and unwelcome. And we named, and we woke up to some hard things, and we wrestled with it. Some of us were frustrated, some of us were charged. And we sat in that circle and we held it all with love. And it felt wonderful to me. Amen. And this is the work of digging down, considering what it means to truly belong to a place, belong to ourselves, spiritual wholeness, that's belonging, belong to one another, and to build a place of belonging for and with, not over. And so we've become kind of pseudo-paleontologists and archaeologists, genealogists and historians. Some of this is cropping up here. Digging down into the earth to resurrect the footprints of those who walked and lived here before. Learning some of their names and trying to piece together, weave together some of their untold stories. And we're learning about our ancestors, and we're learning about this faith's ancestors, and we're learning about all the people whose names we do not know between then and now. And here at First Parish, just like countless other UU congregations right now, I promise you we are not alone in this. We are asking ourselves, how do we hold this tension between belonging to this beautiful place and religion, its history and longevity that means a lot to many of us, and simultaneously knowing at the same time that this building, our church, would not be here, nor would I or you, had it not been for the decimation of the people who originally stewarded and belonged to this land. How do we do that? And how do we make this living our faith? How do we make this spiritual work? For it is. Deep in the earth below this very sanctuary, below our cathedral, what might we find if we dug down into it. And many of you in and out of this soul work, I do call it soul work, are starting to wonder whose pictures and portraits and words should be hanging up on these, our sacred walls, and whose shouldn't, and whether the Arbella ship really is the best symbol to look to and lean on when we talk about justice, faith, liberation, and freedom now in 2022. And these are good questions. Let us be curious, like our young ones opening a wonder box. And I've said this before, we are in this together. We're digging down and building up a new way together, where, like our opening hymn sung, justice rolls down like waters, and where ruins of generations are restored, where devastations from old are raised up, and where peace is born, anointed by God. Anointed by God. What? Oh, we are in this together. So, I have a challenge for you this week. And it's a challenge for me too. And I hope it will spread beyond this week. Our theme this month is belonging. In October, it is courage. And November, it is change. So let's keep it doing brave things around here. Here's the challenge. Dig down, dear ones. For every place you feel a sense of belonging, maybe some of them were named at the water communion last week, go learn about those who were the original stewards of its soil and waters. And take some notes, like a good field scientist. Write their tribe and nation names down. Come to know what happened to them. And ask yourself, who is telling their stories? And whose stories between then and now have also not been told? Dig down and try to map the whole story. And then share what you find with one another, excavators. And listen and be curious. And the last thing I want to say this morning is this, and this is really important. To don't stop, to stay in this. We have to stay in this. Resist the urge to become stagnant or fixed. This is in all matters of being a human being. As an honoring of this, our expanding, alive, shared, widening circle of love and faith, we have to stay in this with one another. And most important, know that this never need be a caravan of despair, but rather a caravan of joy and hope and wonder and love, capital L. So I say to you, we can do this in this blessed house of belonging. I believe that. And so I say to you this morning, amen.